don't get to bury my father and drive away.
Step away from the vehicle.
Not until Dozie Ume hears his brother's name.
Get her away from my car.
My name is Kambili, Ejike's daughter.
Bring her here.
Read it.
Your father chose this life.
No, he chose yours. My father is dying.
Why come to me now?
Because your wife buried the first 3 letters.
Perpetua?
The girl slammed both palms against the hood of the moving Range Rover and did not let go. Stop the car! Stop the car, or I swear I will die right here on this road. The convoy screeched to a halt in the middle of 3rd Mainland Bridge, horns exploding behind it in a wall of noise. Security spilled out of the flanking vehicles, guns not drawn, but hands hovering, and one of them grabbed the girl by the collar of her school uniform and yanked her off the hood like she was nothing. "Get her off my car," Dozie said from the back seat, not even lifting his eyes from his phone. "I have a letter for you," the girl screamed, thrashing against the guard's grip. "My name is Kambili. I am Ejike's daughter. You are my uncle and you will hear me today." The name hit the car like a slap. Dozie's head came up slowly. His jaw got tight. For 11 years, nobody in Dozie's household had been permitted to say that name out loud. Not his drivers, not his mother, not even his wife when she was angry enough to want to hurt him. And now a child was screaming it across a public bridge with half of Lagos filming on their phones. "Bring her," Dozie said quietly. And then he caught himself, because quiet wasn't a word his brand allowed either. He said it low and flat and final. The car sat there on the bridge, traffic backing up for a mile, while Dozie stared at the envelope like it might bite him. 3 hours earlier, before all of this, Dozie was home, in the marble quiet of the Ume estate on Banana Island. His wife, Perpetua's arms looped around his neck from behind as he stood at the window with a glass of cognac he wasn't drinking. "You've been standing here for 20 minutes, Perpetua said against his ear. "Talk to me." "It's nothing." "It's never nothing with you, Dozie. I know your face better than you know it yourself." She turned him around by the collar of her shirt, and he let her. And for a moment, the coldness in him thawed the way it only ever did with her. She pulled him down and kissed him, slow, certain, her fingers curling into his shirt like she was staking a claim on something she was afraid of losing. "I love you," she murmured against his mouth. "Whatever it is, we face it together. That's what we do." "I know," he said, and kissed her again, harder this time, like he was trying to drown a feeling he couldn't name. "I know, Perpetua." What he didn't know, what he had never once thought to ask in 11 years, was that the woman kissing him with such devotion had built her entire marriage on a wall she'd constructed brick by brick between him and his own blood. And she checked that wall for cracks the way other women checked locks on doors. "Board meeting is confirmed on Thursday," she said, pulling back, business sliding smoothly over affection like a mask clicking into place. "The shareholders want the expansion numbers. Everything has to be perfect." "It will be," Dozie said. "I mean it, Dozie. Nothing can go wrong this week. Nothing." Her eyes held his a second too long on that last word, and if he had been paying attention, he might have heard the fear underneath it. He wasn't paying attention. He never was when it came to her. Across the city, in a cramped compound in Ajegunle, Ejike's hand shook so badly he dropped the wrench twice before his wife Nkoli took it from him, gently, and set it down. "You have not eaten today," Nkoli said. "You think I don't see it?" "I have work, Nkoli. The Fashola car will not fix itself." "Ejike." She crouched in front of him, took his face in both hands, and he flinched because even that light touch hurt now. "You are killing yourself for pride. For pride, Ejike. What is pride going to do for our daughter when you are gone?" "Don't say that." I will say it because somebody has to. You have a brother with more money than this entire street, and you would rather die than pick up a phone. He made his choice 11 years ago, Ejike said. He let them call me a thief in front of our father's grave, and he said nothing, Nkoli. I will not beg a man who watched me drown. Nkoli said nothing back, because she had heard this speech 100 times, and it never gets easier to hear a proud man choose death over a phone call. She only pressed her forehead to his and held on, the way you hold on to someone you are afraid of losing before you are ready to lose them.
That night, unknown to either of her parents, Kambili sat on the floor of the storeroom with a torchlight and an old metal box she was never supposed to touch. And inside it, folded under a stack of unpaid bills, she found the letter her father had written 11 years ago and never sent. The confession that would have cleared his name and buried his brother's career in the same stroke. She read it twice, then she folded it into her sock, put on her school uniform even though it was a Saturday, and walked 6 kilometers to the Omek Estate gate because somebody in this family had to stop being afraid. Back on the bridge, Dozie finally picked up the envelope. Why didn't he send this himself all those years? He asked. Because he was protecting you, Kambili said. Just open it and find out what that protection cost him. Dozie's hands were not steady when he broke the seal. The letter was 4 pages, handwriting cramped and rushed, ink smudged in places like tears had fallen on it before it dried. He read the first line, and the car around him disappeared. Dozie, by the time you read this, I will already have signed away everything Papa left me. I need you to know I did it with my eyes open, and I need you to know why, because I cannot carry this alone anymore. He read on, and the version of his own life he had believed for 11 years began to come apart in his hands like wet paper. The fraud case that had almost buried his first contract before it began, the one he had always been told Ejike caused, Ejike's greed, Ejike's carelessness with the company books, had never been Ejike's doing at all. It had been Dozie's own signature on falsified documents, panic-driven, 29 years old and terrified of losing the only opportunity he'd ever been given. And Ejike, older, already respected, already the golden son their father favored, walked into their father's study and told him a different story. A story where the fraud was his, where the shame was his, where the family's fury and their father's disgust and the community's whispering would land on his own back instead of his younger brother's. Because Dozie had a future worth protecting, and Ejike, in his own words, already had nothing left to lose that mattered as much as watching you become somebody. I let them call me a thief so they would never call you one. I gave up my inheritance so you would never have to give up your dream. I have never once regretted it, not even now, not even sick, not even watching my daughter walk 6 kilometers today because I was too proud to call you myself. I only regret that you built a life believing I betrayed you, when the truth is, I would do it again tomorrow. Dozie's hand covered his mouth. Across from him, Kambili watched a billionaire's composure collapse in real time. Watched the man who had ignored her family for 11 years become for the first time only a brother. He's sick, Dozie said, and it wasn't a question. He has been sick for 8 months, Kambili said. He will not go to the hospital because he says the money we would spend on him should feed me instead. He has not eaten a full meal in 3 days. And he still went to work this morning, Uncle. He still went to work. Take me to him now. Perpetua's phone lit up on the marble kitchen counter at exactly that moment. A single message from the head of security she kept on her own payroll, separate from Dozie's. Olga just left with a girl claiming to be Ejike's daughter. Convoy heading to Ajegwinle. Perpetua's fingers went white around the phone. For 11 years, she had managed this. She had intercepted 3 letters before this one, paid off a cousin to make sure Ejike's number never made it into Dozie's new phone after every upgrade, and convinced Mama Chinelo, with money and with fear, to keep her silence about the fraud. Because if Dozie ever learned the truth about that contract, about whose signature had actually been on those falsified documents, he would learn something else too. That the woman who married him 2 years after the scandal, the loyal wife who had stood by him through the rebuild, was the accountant who drew up the falsified documents in the first place, and who let an innocent man take the fall so the man she wanted would never know what she'd made him do. She dialed a number she hadn't used in years. "Mama Chinelo," she said when the old woman picked up. "What problem?" Mama Chinelo said, tired from her sick bed in Enugu, a woman who had spent a decade watching her sons torn apart and telling herself the silence was mercy. "Perpetua," Mama Chinelo said finally. "I am dying. Do you understand that word? I am dying, and I have spent 11 years lying to my own children to protect a secret that was never mine to protect in the first place. Maybe it is time the truth killed something other than me." "Perpetua, don't you dare." The line went dead. Mama Chinelo had hung up. The convoy pulled into the narrow, unpaved street in Ajegwenli, and every child on the block came running to stare at the cars that didn't belong there. Dozie stepped out in a suit that cost more than the entire compound and stood frozen at the gate of the small house he had never once visited. Not for a birthday, not for a burial, not for anything in 11 years. Ejike was in the workshop back there, wrench in hand, when Nkoli came. Ejike, come and see who is here."
"I have no time for jokes, Nkoli. This..." He turned and saw his brother standing in the doorway, and the wrench fell out of his hand and clattered on the concrete. For a long moment, neither man said anything. 11 years of silence stood between them like a third person in the room. Ejike finally said, and his voice was rough, disbelieving. "You came," Dozie said, "and read all of it, Ejike. Why didn't you tell me? 11 years and you let me believe..." "Because you needed to believe it," Ejike's voice cracked into something close to a shout, years of buried grief tearing loose at all once. "You needed to build your empire without the weight of knowing what it cost me. I did it so you would be free." "Free?" Dozie's own voice broke now, and he crossed the small yard in 3 strides and grabbed his brother by both shoulders, and he felt for the first time in 11 years how frighteningly light his brother had become under the loose shirt. "Somebody call an ambulance," Dozie roared, and the whole street erupted into motion. If your chest is tight right now, that's exactly where we want you. Comment "I felt that" below and hit like and stay with us, because Perpetua is not done fighting for the secret that's about to end her marriage, and the boardroom is coming for both of them next. At the hospital, Dozie paced outside the ward while doctors he'd summoned personally were working to stabilize a man he had let waste away in silence for almost a decade. Kambeli sat curled into her mother's side, and Nkoli would not look at Dozie, not out of hatred, but out of 11 years of exhaustion finally allowed to rest on someone else's shoulders for once. "Why did you never come?" Nkoli said. Not really a question, more an accusation, one smoothed by time. "I believed a lie," Dozie said. "I am not asking you to forgive that today. I am only asking you to let me fix what I can fix, starting now. Money will not undo 11 years. "I know," Dozie said, and for the first time since she'd met him on the bridge, Kambili believed him. Perpetua arrived at the hospital 40 minutes later, heels sharp against the tile, face composed into the perfect mask of a supportive wife, rushing to her husband's side. But when she saw Mama Chinelo already there, wheeled in from Enugu against doctor's orders, sitting beside Ejike's sick bed with an oxygen tube in her own nose and her hand resting on her sick son's arm, Perpetua's composure faltered for the first time in over a decade. "Mama, you should be resting. You made the journey against..."
"Sit down, Perpetua," Mama Chinelo said, and there was nothing frail in her voice at all. "I have carried your secret long enough tonight. In front of both my sons, I am putting it down." Perpetua's eyes caught to Nkoli, standing by the window with Kambeli's hand in hers, and for a moment, something almost like pleading crossed her face. "Nkoli, you and I were friends once before all of this. You know I never wanted Ejike hurt. You watched him bury his name for 11 years and said nothing. You sent flowers to your mother's 60th birthday and smiled at me across that hall, knowing exactly what you had done. Do not call me your friend." "I was young. I was frightened. I made one mistake and I have spent every day since trying to build something good out of it. You built a marriage on my husband's grave. There is nothing good standing on top of that." Perpetua's composure finally broke, tears cutting through her makeup, but nobody in the room moved to comfort her. Dozie watched his wife cry and felt, for the first time, nothing underneath his own chest but a hollow, exhausted anger. "How long," he asked her, "were you going to let me live inside your lie?" "Forever if I could have," and the honesty of it was somehow worse than any excuse she could have offered. "That was not love," Dozie said. "That was fear wearing love's clothes. I cannot live inside that anymore." "Mama, this is not the place," Perpetua said, her voice thinning. "It is the only place left," Mama Chinelo said. She turned to Dozie, who stood frozen at the foot of the bed, and to Ejike, weak but awake now, eyes open and fixed on his mother. 11 years ago, it was not Ejike who falsified those contract documents, and you already know that now because your brother finally told you himself. But what he doesn't know, what I have carried alone since the week it happened, is who taught your wife to forge a director's signature on those papers in the first place. The room went silent except for the steady beep of Ejike's monitor. Perpetua was the company accountant before she was your wife. She drew up the false document to cover a shortfall she created, moving client funds she should not have touched. When the fraud investigators came, she panicked, and she came to me, and she begged me to let your brother take the fall, because in her words, Ejike already has nothing to lose, and Dozie has everything ahead of him. I let her believe that lie because I was afraid of losing you both to a scandal. I have been afraid for 11 years. I am not afraid anymore. That's not... Mama, you don't understand the full picture. I was protecting this family. Perpetua's voice had lost every trace of its practiced calm. You are protecting yourself, Ejike said from the bed, quiet but clear, and I let me bury my name to do it. Dozie turned to his wife slowly, and everything in his face that had softened in the last hour hardened into something Perpetua had never seen directed at her in 11 years of marriage. Say it isn't true, he said. Perpetua, look at me and say it isn't true. She opened her mouth and closed it, and in the silence that followed, the truth said itself. I did it for us, he whispered. I did it so we could have this life. I never meant for it to go this far. I never meant for him to get sick. I never... You let an innocent man carry a crime you committed for 11 years, Dozie said. You let my mother lie to me on her deathbed. You let a 15-year-old girl walk 6 kilometers to save her father because you made sure I would never pick up a phone myself. Get out. Dozie, get out, Perpetua, before I say something in front of my family that I cannot take back. 2 days later, the Ome Holdings boardroom was packed for the Thursday shareholder meeting Perpetua once warned him nothing could go wrong for. Dozie stood at the head of the table, Ejike beside him in a wheelchair, stronger already but still healing, and Kambili sat in the front row where her father had insisted she be present for this. 11 years ago, Dozie told the room, this company was built on a lie I did not even know I was living inside. My brother sacrificed his name, his inheritance, and nearly his life to protect mine, and I let him do it in silence because I never once asked the right questions.
That ends today. Effective immediately, 40% of Ume Holdings is being transferred into my brother's name, not as a gift, but as what was owed to him from the beginning. My marriage to Perpetua Ume is over, and the fraudulent origins of our first contract will be disclosed in full to the board and to the regulators, because I would rather lose this company built on a lie than keep it standing on a lie that nearly cost a man his life. Gasps rippled through the room, phones lifted to record, but Dozie did not flinch. One of the older shareholders, a man who had sat on the board since the company's founding, rose halfway out of his seat. Dozie, do you understand what you are handing to the press today? This could unravel everything we've built. What we built was already unraveling, Dozie said. It was unraveling every day I let my brother suffer in silence to protect a name that was never worth what I paid for it. I would rather rebuild this company on truth than keep it standing on a lie that nearly cost a man his life. The room fell quiet again. Even the shareholders who had come ready to fight found nothing to say to a man who was no longer afraid of losing what he had. I ignored my own brother for 11 years because I believed a story that let me feel innocent. I will not spend the rest of my life doing that again. To anyone in this room who has a brother, a sister, a parent, a friend you have gone silent on, call them today. Don't wait for a letter to force your hand the way mine did. Ejike reached up from the wheelchair and gripped his brother's hand, and Dozie gripped it back, and for the first time in 11 years, neither of them let go first. Outside the hospital that same evening, Kambili sat between her father and her uncle on a bench watching the sun go down over Lagos, and for the first time in as long as she could remember, her father's shoulders were not carrying the whole world alone. You saved my life, he told her quietly. 6 kilometers and you saved my life. I only delivered a letter. You delivered the truth, Dozie said. That is a heavier thing to carry than you know, and you carried it anyway. If this story moved you, tell us. Has silence ever cost you someone you love? Drop it in the comments, hit like, subscribe if you are new here so you never miss the next one. And before you go, let us know where in the world you are watching this from. We read every single comment. See you in the next story.